This is the case for Novartis, and it will be presented by Tesla Weighill, Greg Nosel, Carla Villagran, Thomas Wessels, and Sam Normandale.
Alright guys, so now we'll be discussing the summary for our case. Novartis is a Swiss-based pharmaceutical company that started in 1996. As of 2010, a new CEO was appointed named Joe Jimenez. The new CEO's main goals were to expand the business and profits for the company. Jimenez attempted to make many asset swap deals with different companies, but this was not easy. Many of those companies that he attempted to do these deals with were requiring large amounts of percentages of the company or taking something away from him that he necessarily did not want to lose. And the Swiss companies Ciba, Geigy, and Sandoz merged, forming Novartis. First, they were manufacturer companies, which eventually turned into pharmaceutical companies. And Wessels, who was the former CEO of Sandoz, was the reason the company is where it is today. He had many different strategies and techniques to develop this company. First, the diversification strategy was a big help, very big help. And after many efforts, the company Novartis achieved a strong geographical balance. This is very important for many companies. Big investments in high growth markets were also a huge factor. And the drug development was a lengthy process, so companies that began to use biotech firms started to take the lead. Many companies prior to Novartis using these, the biotech firms started using these firms, and they would skyrocket their profits, their drug development, and they would get on top. So eventually Novartis made the correct decision to start investing into a biotech firm.
And now I'll begin the problem statement for this subject. The major problems faced by Novartis include the following issues: an inability to compete effectively on all divisions, the increased pressure to reduce pharmaceutical costs due to the threat of generics, and the choice Novartis must take on what divisions to sell for their long-term profitability. Novartis was having trouble competing since it had spread its resources across different markets that the divisions of the company competed in. They involved themselves in pharmaceuticals, which the company relied for the majority of their profits, also vaccines and diagnostics, generics, over-the-counter drugs, animal health, and eye care. The widespread of markets led to the divisions within the organization fighting for the company's limited resources. These divisions also had an issue where they did not scale when trying to compete on a global scale, namely animal care, vaccines, and over-the-counter drugs. This was made even worse with animal care, since it did not share a distribution channel with other human drugs that the company specialized in. These issues within the different divisions forced the CEO to consider selling off different portions of the organization to better focus the company on the markets that they will do well in. NCEs have been a highly profitable section for the company for a long time, and Novartis has used them in their products for many years. But the time to market, development cost, and the outside pressure they face for such high prices for medication may reduce their long-term value that these products normally provide. This was made even worse as Novartis will eventually lose their patents to the high-margin medicine that they like selling, and the generics will take over most of that market that they had. The CEO must select the best portions of the company to sell in order to keep the company profitable in the long term.
Alright guys, so now we will be discussing the key facts for our case. Novartis became the largest pharmaceutical group in Europe and at the same time led the industry in the number of new drugs that were brought to the market. The new CEO of the time, Jimenez, initiated a strategic review and worked to narrow focus, concentrate portfolio, and increase overall return on investment. The pharmaceutical industry is divided into approximately 20 major categories. The most profitable 3 major categories in the industry are oncology, anti-diabetics, and pain medications. And increased pressure from government agencies and decision makers changed how medications were chosen and approved for a reimbursement through government-funded healthcare programs.
Now we will discuss our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. To begin, we'll talk about the strengths. In 1996, a merger made them the second largest pharmaceutical company in the world. By being the second largest pharmaceutical company means they are making a lot of money and are more valuable to investors and consumers. Additionally, they also built a 33% stake in a rival company, so if their competitor is winning, they're winning because they are profiting off of them. And finally, they have the best record in healthcare industry in getting new drugs to market, introducing 21 drugs to the US in only 14 years. This proves their operations are very efficient, which allows them to produce more medicines and be more profitable. Moving on to the weaknesses, they were not able to effectively compete in all other markets. They relied on pharmaceuticals for 2/3 of its revenue. This leaves money on the table and allows competitors to pass them in other fields. Additionally, if pharmaceuticals failed, they would not be able to sustain large operations. Moving on, we will discuss the opportunities. The pharmaceutical industry was expected to generate an all-time high in revenue. This opens up optimism for the future and the ability to be prepared for the new wave of business. Also, they were the first approved biosimilar in the United States. This gave them a head start in a new market, which is a big competitive advantage. Furthermore, they created both biosimilars and manufactured BARDed biotech drugs, both of which were in smaller markets that were expanding. They also the increase in prescription drug spending meant more people were spending money and there was more opportunity to sell more products. Their outcome-based pricing scheme, this helped them work with the insurance companies and hospitals so that way they could lower the costs of the drugs. And this, of course, was their willingness to partner with the healthcare system, which kept them afloat. Additionally, over-the-counter medications have become more stable and they were growing, so it was just another field of which they were able to thrive. And finally, we will discuss the threats. First, the FDA approval process took about 11 to 14 years to bring a new drug to the market, and with that, only 1 in 10 drugs succeeded. The length of a drug approval is a very long and expensive venture, which also wouldn't guarantee success, so it was a big gamble. Additionally, the drug's patents were expiring. By the patents expiring, this meant that other companies could knock off their original drugs and they'd be able to compete with them at market, and they would no longer have a monopoly on the drug. And the government's responsibility to reduce costs, profit margins would decrease, which would change how they could spend on new development. And finally, they have a plant shut down for FDA violations. This could have brought skepticism to consumers as they would question their safety while using these drugs.
Porter's 5 Forces analyzes the 5 aspects of the industry. Threat of new entrants, which in this case for Novartis is low. High startup cost, as well as barriers to entry, including licensing with the FDA and other government agencies, keeps the threat of new entrants extremely low. Threat of substitutes is high. This is based on the availability of creating generic drugs and substitute items. Bargaining power of buyers is medium risk based on the low availability of consumers to bargain with drug manufacturers, but the high risk of government agencies interfering with the business process of drug manufacturers. The bargaining power of suppliers is low. This is based on widespread availability of chemical components. Oftentimes, pharmaceutical companies will have options across different countries and different suppliers for specific chemical needs. Rivalry among existing competitors is high. This is influenced by the growing cost of drug manufacturing and the smaller margins based on government influence and price bargaining. A recommendation for Novartis is to move away from a diversification strategy and towards a focused diversification strategy. The ability to compete across all the divisions that the company originally had was weakening the stronger divisions and reducing the return on investment. By focusing on higher profit divisions such as oncology and over-the-counter medication, Novartis can maximize their earning potential.
For Novartis implementation strategy, we decided to go with the strategic review implementation. This is going to allow Novartis to have a clear and strategic focus on their main core businesses, which is pharmaceuticals, eye care, and generics. This is what brought them the most money as a company, as a business, and nobody thought that they could only do that, focus on those three, but they have been able to do it. They're the only company that has been able to do it. The way that strategic review will help is finding growth opportunities and problem identification. This is because they're more able to have a focus on them instead of having more of a broad focus. The centralized tasks are going to help save time and resources. This is going to allow them to save money. Their income improves and everybody is happy. This is ultimately what this company wants. They want to improve their income, and we believe this is the best way that they can do it. Thank you.